Today, I'm going to take you with me on a journey, the one that I had on Monday, October 7th. I had intended that this podcast would be shorter, but everything became so intertwined that I decided to include it all, from 6:30 a.m. that morning until late in the evening. I'm Vivian Berkovich, former Canadian ambassador to Israel, and today, grieving, along with so many, in Israel and abroad. On Monday, October 7th, I woke up at 6:30 a.m. Exactly 1 year before, air raid sirens had blasted throughout southern and central Israel 1 minute earlier, 6:29 a.m. A hard rain of rockets pounded the country. It was meant to overwhelm air defense systems and confuse. It achieved both goals. What does one do on this dark day? How to commemorate? How to remember? By late morning, I decided to drive over to the Nova Festival site, which is usually 20 minutes or so from my home on a kibbutz in southern Israel. Thousands of others had the same idea, so the trip took more than twice as long. Everywhere along the way were special new yellow banners and flags for the 97 hostages still in Hamas hell. Everywhere you looked along the road were small gatherings. People were standing, sitting, groups of family and friends grieving in the last known place that their murdered loved ones had been. They placed candles, flowers, photographs, and said little. Solemnity was everywhere. Not a single car horn was honked, which in Israel is remarkable. Not a single street vendor was peddling bagels or even water. This day is different from all the others. We will, with time, develop language and customs to mark it, but we are still very much groping and stumbling our way through. And the grief is so fresh. Several kilometers from the Nova site, the traffic was solid. Cars literally inched along. As did everyone, I decided to pull over and park as soon as a spot opened up. For kilometers, miles, the road was lined solidly on both sides with cars, just as it had been 1 year before. Except then, the cars had been driven by young revelers attending the Nova Music Trance Festival in the desert. So many left their cars in party mode, and they never returned. Some were stalked by Hamas terrorists and slaughtered as they tried to escape. Some were raped before being murdered. Some were burned, tortured. Some were dead. Some were alive. And some were taken hostage, most with injuries, by Hamas monsters. As did I. They locked their cars and headed to the festival site. 1 year ago, by late afternoon on October 7th, thousands of cars parked exactly where I had just parked were incinerated. We have all seen the dystopian images. The cars have since been hauled to a nearby dump site. That, too, has become a memorial site. 1 year ago, the IDF was nowhere to be found, but for a few soldiers who were on duty and faced insurmountable force. Last Monday, October 7th, heavily armed soldiers were everywhere, as were so many police officers. Too many, it felt like. They stood around in clumps. The only time I saw them in action was at the Nova site. I was walking through the hundreds of makeshift memorials to the murdered. I have been to the site very often, but every time I go, it's different. On Monday, the effort that had been put into manicuring the site was evident. I'm not sure that's the right approach. I was there not long after October 7th. The site was raw, real, much more like what it had been that morning. Now it is a series of little parquets, winding paved paths lined with landscaping stones. And I am sure that there are plans to further develop the site. Perhaps, I thought, it is too soon. Just leave it for a while. I recall an older woman who I knew in Toronto. She had survived the war as a teenager in Krakow by hiding in a hole in the floor, lying still under wooden planks all day for years, and emerging only at night to move and eat and relieve herself. The man who hid her also claimed her as his wife. She had no choice. Had he not been killed in fighting after the war, she likely would have remained there. For life. Her mother had been in Auschwitz for 2 years. This woman went to the camp shortly after liberation, when it was as it had been during her mother's captivity. She told me that they never should have improved or developed the site, that they should have left it as it was, Dante's Inferno, and worse. She said it was so difficult just to walk because of the mud. Everything there was treacherous, rough, threatening. Everything was still intact. This woman, who was quite old when we spoke about this, said that it should have been left as it was. Now, she sniffed dismissively, it is like a park. When I first visited Auschwitz more than 50 years after liberation, it was very different, preserved and gentrified. Query how much we should tamper with such important historical sites, and when, and how. The Nova Festival is now one of those special places, as is nearby Zikim Beach, just 8 kilometers north of the Gaza Strip. I have heard it was a beautiful beach. Israelis living in the south flocked there to fish, swim, take in a chill beach scene, very different from what one finds in Tel Aviv or other cities further north along the coast. 1 year ago, on October 7th, shortly after 6:45 a.m., Hamas terrorists came ashore at Zikim in motorized dinghies. The precise number of terrorists who ambushed the dozens of Israelis who were out early on that holiday morning is unknown. 18 souls, aged 17 to 70, out in their happy place to enjoy the sunrise, the sea, the peaceful Saturday morning. As they did everywhere, the terrorists shot wildly that day, killing everyone in sight. Every moving thing, including dogs. They hunted in every crevice. They left behind a trail of blood and anguish. That is the voice of Shlomo Krief, father of 17-and-a-half-year-old Shahaf, who was murdered at Zikim on October 7, 2023. I had been ambling through the Nova site, stopping to read the memorial notes, feeling and absorbing the deep sadness in the place. And suddenly, there was a commotion. I walked towards it. A middle-aged man was at the center of it all. He was so broken, crying, yelling, wailing, attracting attention. Several police officers went over to him. They tried to move him away from the people who were gathering around him, gently. But the people were attached to this man who was not behaving like everyone else. He was loud, sobbing, raw, and he was not going to be silenced, not on October 7th. And so the police hovered respectfully, and they let Shlomo speak. He said that no one cares. Everyone has forgotten people like his son. His son, he said over and over, was murdered while hiding in a bathroom. In a bathroom. Slaughtered. Why does no one care? Cried out this tormented man in anguish. Where is the government? Where is the media? They have all been forgotten. All of these children are my children. They are all our children. He gestured to the graveyard surrounding us. Hallowed, blood-soaked ground. As Shlomo spoke and wept, another man walked over to him. His son, too, had been murdered at Zikim. Where was the army? Both men looked at the police officers, asking, "Where were all of you?" These are questions that are asked constantly. Where was the IDF? Aside from bits of information here and there, a TV documentary here and there, official Israel, the IDF, the Prime Minister have said little or nothing. They've explained nothing. In fairness, several top IDF officials have accepted responsibility for October 7th. But what we still do not know is why. Why was there this complete failure? Prime Minister Netanyahu has refused to accept responsibility. He has consistently blamed others, primarily Army intelligence and the Shin Bet, for this horror. In fact, the Prime Minister has openly questioned the need for a state commission of inquiry. He says there is no need. The majority of Israelis differ. They need to know in order to begin to heal. For the Prime Minister to even question that imperative demonstrates a degree of disconnect that is staggering. Several weeks before October 7, Minister of Transport and Road Safety, Miri Regev, hosted an official state ceremony commemorating the victims and the tragedy. It was pre-recorded in Ofakim, one of the hard-hit towns in southern Israel, and it was recorded weeks before October 7th. Many people made it known that they would boycott that ceremony. They refused to be props in this theater. As well, the families of hostages and those who were murdered told Minister Regev that they did not approve of the state ceremony using images of their loved ones. This hostility towards the government, 1 year later, is so sad and so intense. An alternative event took place in Tel Aviv's Yarkon Park. It was organized by Jonathan Shamries, the older brother of Alon, a hostage who was mistakenly killed by the IDF after he and 2 other captives had escaped from their Hamas guards. Shamries very publicly rejected participating in an event hosted by any government official, saying it would be politicized. His grassroots effort came together with a remarkable event called the Bereaved Families Memorial Ceremony. It was held in Tel Aviv's Yarkon Park, a sprawling green area in the north end of the city. Initially, 40,000 free tickets were available online, and they were snapped up in hours. In the end, the attendance was limited to about 2,000 people due to concerns regarding possible attacks from Iran, Hezbollah, and others. In fact, several missiles were launched from Yemen and directed at Tel Aviv. They were intercepted during the event's setup. But this is Israel, and the evening went on, with seats filled primarily by bereaved families, hostage families, diplomats, and media. It was broadcast live on Channel 12 and clearly resonated with Israelis much more than did the closed event put on by Minister Regev. In the program notes, we include the link to the full 2-hour ceremony and encourage you to watch it. Even if you may not understand the language, it is powerful and it will resonate. You don't need to understand everything. But much of the 2-hour event is subtitled in English. Almost 40 minutes into the program, a beautiful young woman, Yuval Tabelsi, took the stage. She had been married for 1 year to her 27-year-old husband, Mor, and they had gone to the Nova Festival with friends. In a pre-recorded segment that was shown to the crowd in the park, Yuval spoke of how her husband seemed to understand as they tried to flee the carnage in their car. With friends, he understood that he was going to die. He said the prayer, the Shema Yisrael, that is often uttered before death. In the Holocaust, the Shema was heard in the ghettos the trains, the camps. After Moore was shot by Hamas terrorists, she and her friends smeared his blood on themselves and played dead. She lay lifeless and heard the screams of a woman being raped, screams that she said will remain with her forever. The most haunting, horrible sounds. Every morning, Yuval said, when she visits her husband's grave, she tells herself, Zichiti le'ahov, I had a chance to love. One of Israel's music legends, Ivri Lieder, wrote a song with that title, Zichiti le'ahov. Yuval Tabelsi joined Ivri Lieder on stage as he sang his tribute to her, Moore, and all those who perished and lost so much on that Black Sabbath. In the program notes, we include a clip of Yuval speaking in the pre-recorded interview. It is subtitled. We also include a subtitled excerpt of Ivri Lieder's performance on Monday night, where he was joined on stage by Yuval. It is extraordinary. Here, we will play the song, Ani Zichiti le'ahov, I had a chance to love.
כשהשמש נמחקת בשמיים והלב מטפטף לי דרך העיניים החומות ואני זוכר יש ידיים שרוצות אותי קרוב ואני יודע שזכיתי לאהוב כשהרוח אחרי הצהריים היא מפזרת ענפים קטנים ובינתיים זה נעים ואני זוכר יש עיניים שרואות אותי קרוב ואני יודע שזכיתי לאהוב כי אני יודע שזכיתי לאהוב וכשהשמש יוצאת מעל המים ומתחיל עוד יום אפור ובינתיים אין לנו סיבה ואני זוכר שיש שפתיים רוצות אותי קרוב ואני יודע זוכר שיש שפתיים שרוצות אותי קרוב יודע שזכיתי לאהוב. שזכיתי לאהוב.
Speaking immediately after this touching performance was Rafi ben Shitrit, a father of 4 whose only son, Ro'i, fell in battle at the Nahal Oz IDF base in the south. I met Ben Shitrit in July as we gathered to participate in a protest at the base where his son had battled in southern Israel, which was overtaken by Hamas terrorists. Many soldiers, including unarmed females, were murdered brutally that day, as were many men. They were tortured for hours, while 5 young female soldiers, bloodied, sobbing, stunned, and handcuffed, while they sat on the floor being filmed by Hamas thugs, the terrorists pulled out their prayer rugs. They were in no hurry. Later, they forced the young women, some of whom were badly injured, into waiting vehicles. At the ceremony on October 7th, Rafi ben Shitrit spoke of the heroism of his son and so many others. He also said that Israel cannot begin to heal and move forward until there is a state commission of inquiry, until those who were in power then and still are today, until they are held to account, until someone explains why these young soldiers and civilians of all ages were left for hours to fend for themselves. Ben Shitrit addressed those who attended the alternate ceremony and implored the nation to honor the legacy and heroism of the fallen, to convene a state commission of inquiry and accept responsibility for that horrific day. Israel must undertake a national soul-searching, he said. It is the least that can and must be done to honor our values and the fallen. And when he did that, when he made that request in the name of his son, his comments sparked one of the few times that the crowd applauded. Rafi ben Shitrit's grief and resolve touched a very sensitive nerve.
מתוך אהבה ודאגה לארץ הזאת, לא מעמדה פוליטית. אני מבקש מעל במה זו לקרוא להקמת ועדת חקירה ממלכתית שתחקור לעומק וביסודיות את אסון 7 באוקטובר.
We have included in the podcast notes the clip of Rafi ben Shitrit's remarks at the event, subtitled. At the event in Tel Aviv on Monday night, so many of the participants spoke of having been abandoned by the state of Israel, of being ignored by the prime minister and his government. No one has called them. No one has paid respects. They are bitter. Their loved ones paid the ultimate price, and many are still paying. So many Israelis, in addition to Shlomo Krief, who we met earlier at the Nova site, speak of having been abandoned by the state, of having been forgotten. The second man, whose son had also been murdered at the same beach as Shahaf Krief, said that he had gone to Zikim Beach on that day, on Monday, October 7th, 2024, in order to pay his respects at the spot where his son was murdered. But he said that the place was unrecognizable. Everything was changed. He could not find the spot. There was not even a memorial plaque, he said. Nothing. It was all erased. I had heard about this renovation and refurbishment from an acquaintance a few months ago. He lives on a nearby kibbutz and is an avid surfer. Zikim was his happy place. He now says he will never go back there. He told me about the ongoing renovation with a tone of contempt, which he said began very soon after October 7th. He was angry. He said it felt like an erasure. It was too soon. People are still so steeped in grief. They need time. Israel has long prided itself on how quickly it cleans up the mess from terror attacks and carries on. Previously, that has been lauded as a strength, as an indicator of resilience. It is not that the pain dissipates, but it is that there is this steel rod running through society of necessity to push through the pain. But perhaps this time things were pushed in some spots a little too quickly and thoughtlessly. Shlomo Krief and the small crowd that grew around him felt that way. They were all grieving and felt forgotten. When he repeated over and over that no one wants to hear his story, one woman said to him with such compassion, "We're just regular people. We want to hear your story. That's why we are here." And for the next half hour or so, we comforted Shlomo and listened. Eventually, the larger group peeled off into smaller groups. At one point, I saw a middle-aged woman weeping inconsolably and quietly into her hand. I asked her, "Are you Shahaf's mother?" And she fell apart, sobbing. She buried her face in me as I hugged her tightly for several minutes. You stop seeing and hearing in a moment like that. I was completely absorbed in her overpowering grief and despair. Rita is her name. Her son Shahaf, she told me, was murdered in a bathroom. At the beach, she told me. At Zikim. He loved to swim, she said. He was always at the beach. I told her that I love swimming too, that I've always loved it, since I was a baby. That made her cry more and smile. I have no answers. No one does. This horror of October 7, 2023 will never end. The ground, the roads, everything you see in that area is saturated with a grief, a biblical grief that we may never understand. But we do have to find a way to live with it, speak about it, and commemorate it. Thinking today and every day of October 7, 2023, a day of infamy. Thank you for listening. For those of you who observe or mark Yom Kippur, I wish you an easy fast, Chatima Tova, and a good year. We love hearing from you, so please comment on our website, stateoftelaviv.com, or send us a note to hello@stateoftelaviv.com. On behalf of the State of Tel Aviv core team, Yon Zabo, our creative, graphic, visual, and marketing man, Amir White, producer and editor extraordinaire, sound guy, who is also impressively patient with me and my boomer tech deficiencies, and our social media manager, who pitches in on everything, Maya Naftalin. Thanks to the team. Thanks to you for being here. We'll be back soon.